There is a version of your family that used to exist. A version where the kitchen smelled like Sunday breakfast and everyone had a seat at the table. Where arguments got resolved before bedtime. Where the phone calls were long and the silences were comfortable. And then something happened. Maybe it was one fight that went too far. Maybe it was a decision someone made that the others never forgave. Maybe nobody even remembers exactly how it started. Only that one day, the distance was just there, settled in like furniture. Like it had always been that way. This is the story of the Calloway family. And I need you to understand something before we begin. This is not a fairy tale. There is no perfect ending with a bow on top. What happens to the Calloways is messy and uncomfortable and real. And it all started with one wish made by the one person in the family nobody expected. Stay with me. The Calloways were, at one point, the kind of family that looked like a greeting card. Robert and Patricia Calloway raised 3 children in a 4-bedroom colonial house in a suburb just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Robert was a contractor, hardworking, stoic, the kind of man who showed love by fixing things around the house rather than saying the words out loud. Patricia was a high school English teacher, warm, articulate, the emotional backbone of everything. Their 3 children could not have been more different from each other. The oldest was Diane, 38 years old now, a corporate attorney in Chicago, the kind of woman who had built her entire identity around being competent and in control. She called home twice a month, always on schedule, always for exactly 20 minutes, always slightly formal, even with her own mother. The middle child was Marcus, 35, a musician who had spent his 20s chasing a record deal that never fully materialized, now teaching guitar lessons out of a rented studio in Austin, Texas. He was funny, magnetic, and deeply sensitive, the kind of person who felt everything twice as hard as everyone else and had learned to cover it with humor. And then there was the youngest, Lily, 29 years old. She lived closest to home, a 40-minute drive from her parents' house in Charlotte, and yet in many ways, she was the most distant of all 3. Lily had married young, had a 7-year-old daughter named Grace, and somewhere in the chaos of early motherhood and a marriage that had quietly fallen apart, she had pulled back from everyone. Not dramatically, just slowly. The calls got shorter, the visits got fewer, the version of herself she showed her family became thinner and thinner until there was almost nothing left to show. Robert and Patricia were in their late 60s, still in the same house, still sleeping in the same bed, still drinking coffee together every morning on the back porch. From the outside, they looked fine. They looked like the last stable thing standing in a family that had slowly drifted apart at every seam. But here is what nobody knew. Robert had been keeping a secret for 3 months. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in October. Robert had been ignoring the symptoms for months, the fatigue he blamed on getting older, the weight loss he credited to eating better, the persistent ache he told himself was just an old injury acting up. Patricia had begged him to go to the doctor. He had said he would, he kept not going. That was Robert stubborn in the particular way that men of his generation were taught to be, where admitting physical vulnerability felt dangerously close to admitting something worse. When he finally went, it wasn't because he wanted to. It was because he collapsed in the driveway one morning carrying a bag of mulch. Patricia drove him to the ER herself, and 3 days and a battery of tests later, sitting in a beige office across from an oncologist who spoke carefully and kindly and with the measured tone of someone delivering information that would rearrange everything, Robert Calloway found out he had stage 3 pancreatic cancer. He sat very still in that chair. Patricia gripped his hand so hard her knuckles went white. The doctor spoke about treatment plans and timelines and options. Robert heard the words but couldn't assemble them into sentences. He kept thinking strangely about the mulch still sitting in the driveway at home. He had never finished spreading it. On the drive home, neither of them spoke for 20 minutes. Then Patricia said, "We have to tell the kids." And Robert said, "Not yet." Patricia looked at him. He was staring at the road. "Robert," I said, "not yet, Patricia. Let me think." She didn't push. She had been married to this man for 41 years. She knew when to push and when to wait. She waited. What Robert was thinking, sitting in the passenger seat of his own car, being driven home by his wife on the worst day of his life, was not about treatment. It was not about timelines. It was about his children. About the distance between them. About the years that had piled up like unread mail. About the conversations nobody had finished and the apologies nobody had delivered and the table at Thanksgiving that got smaller every year. He was thinking, if I tell them now, They will come home for the wrong reason. They will come home out of obligation and guilt. They will be kind to me because I am sick, and I will never know if they would have come back anyway. I want them to come back. I want them to choose this family. Not because I'm dying, because it's worth choosing. He thought about it for 3 weeks, and then he called Lily. Lily almost didn't pick up. She was in the middle of bath time with Grace, the bathroom floor was soaked, the dog was barking at something in the backyard, and her phone was buzzing on the edge of the sink with her dad's name on the screen. She almost let it go to voicemail. She almost did what she had been doing for years, telling herself she'd call back later and then not doing it. But something made her pick up. Her dad's voice sounded different, quieter, like something had been turned down inside him. He didn't lead with the diagnosis. He didn't lead with anything heavy. He just said, "Lily, I need to ask you something and I need you to hear me out before you respond." She sat on the edge of the bathtub. Grace looked up at her with soapy hair and wide eyes. Lily held up 1 finger times 1 minute times, and Grace went back to her toys. Robert said, "I want to have Christmas at the house this year. All of us. Diane, Marcus, you and Grace, me and your mom. I want everyone under this roof at the same time. That's what I want. That's all I'm asking." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Dad, Diane hasn't been home for Christmas in 4 years. And you know Marcus and Diane can barely be in the same room after what happened." "I know," he said. "I know all of that. I'm asking anyway." There was something in his voice. Not desperation, something quieter than desperation. Something that sounded like a man who had done the math on something and arrived at a number that scared him. "Is everything okay, Dad?" A pause. 3 full seconds. "Everything is fine," he said. "I just miss my family. Is that allowed?" Lily closed her eyes. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's allowed." She called Diane the next morning. She called Marcus that afternoon. She told them both that Dad had asked for everyone home at Christmas and that she thought they should do it. Diane said she would have to check her schedule. Marcus said he wasn't sure he and Diane were in a place to spend a week together under the same roof. Lily said she understood all of that and she thought they should come anyway. What Lily didn't say to either of them was what she had heard in her father's voice. That quiet thing, that subtraction. She didn't have the words for it yet, but it had reached into her chest and gripped something. And one by one, with varying degrees of reluctance, they all said yes. Diane flew in from Chicago on December 22nd. She arrived in a wool coat and rolling luggage, professionally composed, her phone in her hand as the Uber pulled into the driveway of the house she had grown up in. She stood on the front walk for a moment, looking at the front door, the same green door, the same brass knocker, the same slightly uneven porch step her father had been meaning to fix for 15 years. Something shifted in her chest that she immediately composed back into neutrality. She rang the doorbell of her parents' house. She had not done that in years. She had always just walked in before. The fact that she rang the bell told the whole story of how far she had traveled, not in miles, but in the interior distance that accumulates when people stop feeling at home where they came from. Patricia opened the door and pulled her daughter into a hug that lasted longer than Diane expected. She stood stiffly for the first 2 seconds of it. Then something in her shoulders came down an inch. "You're here," her mother said into her hair. "I'm here," Diane said. Marcus arrived 3 hours later in a rental car with a guitar case in the back seat and a bag of Texas barbecue he had somehow transported on the plane. He came through the door like a weather event, loud, warm, filling the room immediately. He hugged his mother for a long time. He shook his father's hand and then pulled him into a hug that Robert submitted to with the slightly awkward grace of a man who was not built for physical affection but was trying. Then Marcus saw Diane in the kitchen doorway. The room temperature dropped 2 degrees. "Diane," he said. "Marcus," she said. Their mother looked between them with the expression of a woman who had been mediating this particular silence for 3 years and had not yet found the right tool for it. Lily arrived last, Grace running up the front path ahead of her, straight into Robert's arms. And something happened to Robert's face in that moment.
Girl.
Something cracked open behind his eyes that he recovered
sweetie.
from quickly, but that Patricia saw, and that told her everything she needed to know about why this Christmas mattered as much as it did. That night, all 5 of them sat around the dinner table for the first time in 6 years. It was not comfortable. It was not warm. It was the particular stiffness of people who once knew each other completely and are now performing a version of that knowing for an audience of each other. The conversation stayed on surfaces, travels, weather, Grace's school, football. Nobody went anywhere real. But they were there, under the same roof, breathing the same air. And Robert sat at the head of the table looking at his family with an expression that nobody could quite read. It happened on Christmas Eve. It started as most real things do, with something small. Marcus was in the kitchen after dinner, doing the dishes, a thing he had always done growing up because it was his assigned chore and some habits survive everything. Diane came in to refill her wine and they were alone together for the first time since the falling out 3 years ago. Marcus said, without turning from the sink, "Are we ever going to talk about it?" Diane said, "This isn't the time." "It's never the time with you, Diane. That's the whole problem." She set her glass down. "Excuse me?" He turned around. "I said that's the whole problem. Everything gets filed and managed and scheduled, and by the time you decide it's the right time, the moment is 3 years gone and we're strangers who happen to share parents. You want to talk about strangers? You borrowed $40,000 and disappeared to Austin without a word for 8 months. I paid you back. That's not the point, and you know it." Their voices were rising. In the living room, Patricia closed her eyes. Robert put down his book. But then Grace, 7 years old, in her Christmas pajamas, completely unbothered by the adult drama, walked into the kitchen, looked at both of them, and said with magnificent simplicity, "Why are you guys fighting? It's Christmas Eve." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the house. Marcus looked at his niece. Something in his face shifted completely, the defensiveness draining out of it like water from a tub. He crouched down to her level. "You're right, Bug," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right." Diane stood very still. She looked at her brother crouched in front of her niece and felt something she had not felt in years, the particular grief of missing someone who is standing right in front of you. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was different now. The lawyer was gone. He looked up at her. "I missed you," she said. "I was so angry and I missed you the whole time." He stood up slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." They didn't hug. Not yet. But the wall, the specific wall that had been built brick by careful brick over 3 years of silence and pride, developed its first crack. And once a wall like that cracks, the rest follows faster than anyone expects. Later that night, Lily found her father on the back porch alone. He was sitting in his usual chair, looking at the backyard, a blanket over his knees, a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. The night was clear and cold, and the yard looked exactly as it had looked for 30 years. The oak tree they had all climbed as children. The garden Patricia kept in warmer months. The old basketball hoop Robert had installed when Marcus was 9 and never taken down. Lily sat in the chair beside him. She pulled her own blanket around her shoulders. They sat quietly for a while. That was always the Calloway way the real conversations happened, in the silences between sentences. Then Lily said, "Dad, what aren't you telling us?" Robert wrapped both hands around his cold coffee cup. The back door light cast a yellow rectangle across the porch. Somewhere inside the house, she could hear Marcus playing guitar softly, and Grace's delighted laughter and her mother's voice. "I got some news a few months back," he said. "Medical news." Lily went very still. He told her everything. His voice was steady and quiet and matter-of-fact, the way he had always delivered hard information, not because he didn't feel it, but because he believed that steadiness was a gift you could give the people you loved when the ground was shifting. When he finished, Lily didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Does Mom know? She was in the room when the doctor told me. Does she know you haven't told us?" "She's been very patient about my stubbornness," he said, the ghost of a smile. "Dad," her voice broke on the single syllable. "Hey," he said. He reached over and covered her hand with his. "Hey, look at me." She looked at him. Her eyes were full. "I didn't bring you all home because I'm sick. I want you to know that. I brought you home because I looked at this family, at what we'd let it become, and I decided I wasn't willing to accept it. Sick or not sick, we are not people who stop showing up for each other. We are not that family. I refuse." Lily pressed her lips together. "You should have told us," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you're here. You all came, and that tells me everything I needed to know." Inside the house, Marcus had switched to a Christmas song. Grace was singing along to words she only half knew. Diane's laughter, real laughter, unguarded, floated through the glass door. Robert Calloway sat on his back porch and listened to his family inside his house, and the expression on his face was not sadness. It was something closer to victory. Christmas morning changed everything, not in a single dramatic moment. In the accumulated weight of small ones, it was Marcus making pancakes at 7 a.m. the way he had done every Christmas since he was 12. It was Diane sitting on the kitchen counter in her pajamas, the composed attorney completely gone, eating batter off a spoon, and arguing with her brother about whether blueberries belonged in pancakes. It was Lily watching them from the doorway with Grace on her hip and feeling the knot in her chest loosen by degrees. It was Robert and Patricia watching all of it from the breakfast table, his hand over hers, neither of them speaking because nothing needed to be said. After the gifts, after Grace had torn through wrapping paper with the focused destruction only a 7-year-old can achieve, Robert asked everyone to sit down. He told them all of it. The diagnosis, the timeline, the treatment plan he and Patricia had been navigating quietly for 3 months. He told them the way he had told Lily on the porch, steadily, factually, without drama. When he finished, the room was very quiet. Diane was the first to speak. Her voice was the voice of someone who had spent 20 years learning to think before she felt and was in this moment feeling before she could think. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I needed to know you'd come home for me, he said, not for the diagnosis. The room sat with that. Marcus, who had been staring at his hands, looked up, his eyes were red. Dad, we would have... Would you? Robert said, not accusing, genuinely asking. Because the last 6 years suggest otherwise. And I'm not saying that to hurt anyone, I'm saying it because it's true and we're done not saying true things in this family. Nobody argued, because he was right, and they all knew it. And the knowing, the mutual simultaneous recognition of a truth that had been sitting in the middle of the family for years, like furniture nobody admitted was broken, was the thing that finally fully broke the wall down. Diane cried. She did it quietly, the way she did everything, hands folded in her lap, spine straight, tears falling without permission. Marcus moved to the couch and put his arm around her, and she let him. Lily held Grace a little tighter. Patricia sat beside Robert and leaned her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that for a while. All of them in the same room, all of them present, all of the distance, the years of it, the weight of it, the waste of it laid out between them, not as an accusation, but as a starting point. This is where we are, this is what we let happen, this is the family we still have time to be. Robert began treatment in January. Diane flew back to Charlotte every 3 weeks. She stopped scheduling the calls. She started just calling, sometimes at odd hours, sometimes just to say nothing important, which turned out to be the most important calls of all. Marcus delayed a teaching contract in Austin to stay through February. He and Diane finished their conversation, the real one, the $40,000 one, the underneath the money one about feeling abandoned and unseen. It took 3 hours and a bottle of wine, and it was uncomfortable the entire time. And at the end of it, they were brothers and sisters again in the way that actually means something. Lily started showing up. Not the thin version of herself she'd been presenting for years, the real one. The one who was scared and tired and needed her family as much as her family needed her. Grace started calling Robert every Sunday. 7 years old, sitting on her bedroom floor with her mom's phone, telling her grandfather everything that happened that week with the thoroughness of a news anchor. Robert lived for those calls. Patricia said they did more for him than the medication. The treatment was difficult. There were good months and hard months. But here's what I want you to take from this story, because this is the part that matters most. The Calloway family did not get back together because the circumstances forced them to. Not really. Yes, Robert's diagnosis was the thing that crystallized the moment. But the wish, the actual wish at the center of this story was made before the diagnosis was revealed. It was made by a man sitting in a beige oncologist's office, thinking not about his own survival, but about the survival of his family. He wished for one table, one roof, one Christmas. He wished for his children to choose each other. And they did. I want to ask you something. When was the last time you called the family member you've been meaning to call? Not texted, called. Most of us are living with some version of the Calloway distance, a sibling we stopped talking to, a parent we love but have stopped truly seeing, and we keep telling ourselves, there's time. Robert Calloway would like a word with anyone still waiting for the right time. The right time is not coming. The right time is the one you make. So here is what I need you to do. Right now, today, think of one person. Pick up the phone. You don't need a script. Just say, I've been thinking about you. I miss you. That is the entire wish. That is all Robert asked for. And look what it gave his family back. If this story moved, you share it. Send it to the family group chat. Send it to the sibling who will know exactly why you're sending it. Subscribe and turn on notifications because every week we tell the stories that remind us what actually matters. Take care of your family while you still can. I'll see you in the next one.